people, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more complaining. People, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more.
But I'm going to talk about it today, and in honor of the death of Prince Philip. Love and blessings out to the royal family. I have known a number of people who were just so into the royal family. My ex-wife's mother-in-law just always knew what was going on, and she read all these magazines about the royal family and was obsessed with them. And a few years ago, I fell into the Downton Abbey thing. I don't know if you've watched Downton Abbey, but I did. I watched it years after it was famous, and then I watched it. I went and saw the movie, and it's an interesting character study of people who are the elite, what's the word I'm looking for? Knighted, the lords and ladies in England. It's interesting if you think about it and how this goes back. It really goes back to feudalism. And the idea was a king would try and take over more and more and more and more areas because that's the way the ego goes. And so kings would try and take over more and more places. And as a result, in the process, they would also have to establish people to monitor it so that when they were gone, so they would establish these little fiefdoms, they would establish people who would then rule. And the king then didn't have to rule the entire country. If the king was in charge of 10 million people, the king only had to rule 100 people, and each one of those people had to rule X number of people. So this is how all of this began. Now, I want to talk about grace today, and to say that one of the things that is missing in our culture, in my opinion, is a person who is the grace person in our culture, who leads us with grace. I think our current president is doing a very good job. However, I think for someone who is simply there to be the state person, who is the representative of the country and doesn't run the business, but is supposed to be the person that everyone looks to, I think that's a wonderful thing. And I applaud the fact that England continues to have it, and other countries where it works, to a mix of monarchy and democracy. And one of the things that you can say about the British, I used to listen to a lot of Monty Python, and they would poke fun at themselves and about how proper and polite and everything they are. And one of the things about Americans is that we are often described as being brash, in your face. So I think about this idea of grace, and I looked the word up so that I could speak with a bit more authority. Here we go. This, by the way, this came about because I was watching an episode of Seinfeld and was asking myself, because in there, Elaine is asking whether or not she has grace. And so I asked myself, do I have grace? Simple elegance or refinement of movement. That's what we tend to think of. Someone is graceful. Someone moves elegantly. Audrey Hepburn, a lot of people would say. Simple elegance or refinement of movement. However, grace also has the following term: courteous goodwill. Courteous goodwill. Whew. In How to Win Friends and Influence People, you learn how to disagree with somebody. One of the first things you do is to agree with them, because from that person's perspective, it is correct. They are absolutely correct. So what you want to do is to validate it. Now, what do we tend to do? Myself included. I find myself taking this shorthand with my daughter, and my daughter says, "Come on, Dad." Because I'll say that she'll give me an idea and I'll go, no. And she's like, okay, first of all, you don't have to say no 9 times. And second of all, you might want to consider it before you shoot it down. And she's right. And so this idea of being gracious, courteous goodwill, saying something like, that's a very good idea. And again, I go back to my TV show, Ted Lasso. There's a scene in there where two of the soccer players are about to fight. And one of the young coaches offers an observation. And he says, instead of saying to the coach, because the young man is totally off with his suggestion. And instead of saying, shut up, later, or giving the guy a dirty look, he looks at him and says, you know what? I really appreciate you, but now's not the time. Wow, what a great way to handle it. First, I really appreciate you, but now's not the time. That is courteous goodwill. Courteous goodwill. So often, everywhere I go, I hear people bitch about other people on social media. And it's often the people who themselves complain the most, complain about all the negativity on social media. That has been my experience. Everyone wants there to be grace on the internet. Grace leads to civility. And yet nobody remembers that, just like with the golden rule, it's always your move. It's always your move. What unfortunately happens is that when someone says or does something that is less than gracious, and by the way, you'll notice the word grace in the words gracious. It's very close to the word, grateful. Just ate breakfast. Grateful, grace. We need to remember that it is always our move. Unfortunately, we feel slighted. We feel defensive. And notice when I say we, I'm talking about me. And then we make a comment or something like that. And just like I've shared with you before in that study where they asked two people to hold one another's arms. And then they told person A, okay, squeeze the other person's arm. Boom, that person squeezed it. Now they tell person B, squeeze the first person's arm, squeeze person's A's arm the same amount. They always squeeze harder, and then they always squeeze back harder, even when asked to do the same amount. So what we think is that we are responding in kind, and really what we need to do is respond in kind. Kind. The other day I had somebody, I posted something on Facebook, and somebody just came in and dogged it, just jammed on it. And of course, inside I went, my ego was like, how dare you? I know that I'm right. And da-da-da. And can't you see it's gotten 143 shares and 400 people have liked it. What is wrong with you? Blah, 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 blah. And instead I went, I'm sure you are absolutely correct from your perspective. Could you explain to me how you see it that way? And I'm sure the person was like, because you know how it is, especially when you post on somebody famous's site. Number one, you think they're not going to respond. Number two, you're afraid if they do. And instead, what I did was I was just grace. So we all want to be around Downton Abbey characters, but we want to act like the Bowery Boys. How's that for dating me? So how can you be more gracious today? Remember that gracious is so close to the word grateful. One of the things I'm trying to do is to wrap my conversations with compliments. I was talking to an old friend the other day, met him for lunch, and I just said, you know what? You have always been a good friend. And he looked at me like, wow. And he said, thank you. You know what? You've always been a good friend to me too. And then as we left, I thanked him for meeting me. It doesn't take a lot to be gracious. And like I said, you don't have to be a character off of Downton Abbey to be gracious or to demonstrate grace. Grace is simply courteous goodwill. Little acts of grace. I try and wave people onto the elevator ahead of me. If they've got a mask, I open gates for people. Little things that you can do. What are little things that you can do? Tell you one thing that's courteous goodwill. A smile. Knowing that people, when they approach you, human beings, you know me, I always get into psychology. First, we evaluate people from a distance, regardless of their age or whatever. We ask ourselves, are they a potential mate or a potential threat? That is what our lizard brain does. And then beyond that, we are beginning to have an experience with that person. The number one thing we want from that person is warmth and appreciation. Human beings have only one way of showing that: smile. So I realize I said some contradictory things: have a mask and smile. But you know what I've noticed? I was at the grocery store the other day and I tried to get as many people to smile at me with my eyes, not trying to be creepy, but just as I walk by, smiling with my eyes. And it worked. So today, ask yourself, am I demonstrating grace? Am I showing courteous goodwill? We want everybody else to do it. But like I said, you got to remember, it's always your move. And because I said it's always your move, it's your turn to share. Please click share right now if you wouldn't. Thank you to those of you who are here for the first time and those of you who click share every day. Good morning from South Carolina. Grateful for Friday, says Michelle. I heard that. I've got a bunch of stuff planned for tomorrow. I've got a bunch of friends I'm going to talk to. And Teddy and I went paddleboarding last night and watched the sunset. It was just awesome. Grateful for beautiful flowers, says Paula. The weather forecast, 49 degrees in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Grateful for April showers. Says Dominic and Juanita. So get this. I know this is true. I mean, this is going to sound crazy. But before I moved down here, for years, I would look at the forecast in the Keys in Miami, and I would always go, man, look at that. 72 to 81 degrees, almost year round. Now I might get up to 77 to 90 in the summer, but 72 to 81. And this morning I got up and I looked and I said, there's no rain in the forecast for the next week. Stimulation and change. It's the number one thing we all want. It's also the number one thing that we all fear. People are interesting. I absolutely love British culture. I'm a true Anglophile. Yeah, see, I know there's a lot of people, especially women I have found, who are really, really into it. I think it's very cool. I've never spent some time in London, but I plan to. Grateful to be getting my second Moderna shot today. That is great. You know what? I got my second Pfizer day before yesterday, and yesterday I just felt tired. But other than that, I was good. Ed says, since I'm running behind schedule today, I definitely need to keep courteous goodwill in my mind as the day unfolds. It's interesting. I want to talk about courteous goodwill real quick. I have a friend because we all have our own weirdness, right? We all have our idiosyncrasies. I'm always late. If you'll notice, I'm clicking in at 8:01. Don't know why. My goal is to be here at 8 o'clock, but I'm always starting at 8:01, which is better than what I used to be. I used to be late for considerably more from other things. And I have a friend who is compulsively early. He has to set an alarm so that he will not leave too early or ultimately embarrass the other person when they find out he's been waiting for 20 minutes. But that's his thing. We all have our thing. Grateful to be able to make my own decisions, deciding to include my outdoor exercise into my day now that the weather is beautiful. I love that, Susan. That is great. Like I said, I've got 2 paddle boards here. I bought 2 yoga paddle boards, and getting myself out there to do them sometimes is difficult. Meemaw, click shared, and Kat says, good night from New Zealand. Kat, thank you so much, and bless you all in New Zealand. Y'all are just awesome. Thanks everybody for being here with me this morning. Sorry I was late. We actually did this twice. I was on for about 4 minutes and then realized that my Wi-Fi was, so I had to I just wanted to start it over. So thanks for being with me. Bless you all. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, which is Saturday. I'm here 7 days a week. Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
No more complaining. People, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more complaining. People, their lives are changing. We're flying high.